This is TRAXXfm. Playing your favorite music 24/7. Experience the excitement right here. Right here on TRAXXfm.
Budget 2023 highlights.
372.3 billion will be set aside for Budget 2023, themed Keluarga Malaysia Makmur Bersama. This budget will ensure the well-being of the rakyat, continuity of business, and the efficiency of the civil service.
Good evening. It is Kong Yu live in the studios of TRAXXfm. 6:21 p.m. We've just had the tabling of Budget 2023 for further discussion in Parliament by our Finance Minister. And it is back with our special guests today who've been on hold with us with the pre-budget in the earlier part of the afternoon, as well as now getting into a post-budget discussion. Yeah, first of all, over the phone lines, we have with us Associate Professor Dr. Mohd Helmi Ali, Deputy Dean of Research, UKM-Graduate School of Business. Prof, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, just to check, because we are live on air. We are also joined live in the studios of TRAXXfm by two special guests today. Yeen, founder and Chief Executive Officer of the Centre for Research, Advisory and Technology, CREATE, as well as Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam, Abdul Rashid, Head of Economics and Research Department of EPF Malaysia. Thank you for your presence today. First of all, right, ladies and gentlemen, so the theme, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a little bit of a bit of a repetition there, or am I living in a bit of a time warp? So it's Keluarga Malaysia Makmur Bersama. But this sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Okay, so that's one. Prof, on that note, yes, let's begin with you. Yeah, your initial thoughts, Prof, and also, on the theme itself.
Yeah, thank you. I think the theme of Keluarga Malaysia Makmur Bersama, the government, this budget 2023 is trying to put the inclusivity of everyone. So then they are taking a careful lookout to every single component or every segments of Malaysian. And then with such a hefty amount of budget, about 372 billion, I think it is basically trying to give back to the people.
Okay, your initial thoughts, Doctor?
Okay, for me...
do you have anything to add to your initial thoughts, Prof?
No.
Okay, Doctor, go ahead.
Sure.
Yes.
I'm just looking at the revised forecast numbers for GDP. The government has actually bumped up their forecast for this year from 5.3% to 6.3% to 6.5% to 7%. So that actually resonates really well with the current numbers that we have. So this year, no doubt it's going to be a good year in terms of growth. But going forward, next year, they are looking at a growth of in the region of 4% to 5%. So that's an indication that we need to be careful about next year. And therefore, I think that's the guiding principle when the government crafting all these measures in order to face the potential headwinds next year.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that thought, because, so we've got some, in a way, confirmation that this year has gone a lot better than how we've been basically feeling it sentiment-wise as well. But it does look like there's a lot of caution, that's already buffered in store for 2023. Okay, maybe more about that when we get further on with the discussion. But Yeen, what are your initial thoughts on the budget?
This is definitely an expansionary budget, sufficient fiscal support to ensure that the rakyat is being properly supported. I think the government have also made a concerted effort to also address issues, for example, like food security that we spoke about earlier. We saw deliberate attention on agriculture, how to incentivize people to going back to farming. So I think the government is really trying to iron the wrinkles within the economy or the uneven development or recovery of different industries.
Yeah, that's always a tough thing to do, right? Especially considering we're working on a year-to-year basis. Outside, of course, all of the longer-term plans, such as the 12 Malaysia plan, for example. Yeah. Other thoughts, opinions, so feel free to jump in. Yeen Sin, Prof, also Doctor, your initial reactions to this budget. Prof, anything else to share with us?
Yeah, I think I agree with Yeen Sin about the focus on agriculture and then even the technology advancement, for example, artificial intelligence and on. So there are a lot of incentives being given to these sectors, as well as digitalization important, where we learned a lot from the COVID-19 impact last time, where this type of this type of expansion and then venturing into the more advanced technology will basically help in our getting better on our economy point of view.
Now, overall, it is expansionary. I think Yeen Sin has used that term, slightly expansionary. I mean, I was just reading that, collating some information online and so on, that there were people who were actually expecting a slightly bigger budget. Right, about 10 billion more in some of what I've read. But what are your thoughts on this in terms of the amounts versus, I know this is a broad question, right, versus the disparity when it comes to not just the deficit, but also where the revenue sources would be made up from?
Oh, okay. In terms of the deficits level, the government is looking at slightly lower deficit target from 5.8% of GDP this year to 5.5%. So in that sense, the government is very careful in terms of prescribing a continued expansionary policy approach going forward. And in that sense, I think it's almost timely that the government is, the YB-MK that did mention about the possibility of the introduction of Fiscal Responsibility Act for this during this Parliament session. So I think if that can happen, that could actually add more credibility if this law can be passed during this session.
And then we've also seen certain measures. There were no big details, I think, that was being revealed about certain taxations that were rumored to either been removed. I know we spoke about the low cost goods, i.e. shopping, right? Which, of course, Prof, you also mentioned prior to the tabling of the budget, that's something that affects us all as consumers. Not quite sure about what's going to happen with that. But overall, I mean, there were pre-budget discussions about possible taxation for other areas. Correct me if I'm wrong, was this discussed at all in terms of digital currency, NFTs and so on?
I didn't pick that up though.
Yeah, I don't think they were. Yeah, so there was some pre-budget murmurs that these were going to undergo certain taxation and so on. Yeah, but Yeen Sin, you had something that you wanted to add.
Regarding just now about expansionary budget, yes, to most people, this budget is definitely the biggest ever. But if I want to take another approach, in the past you may spend 6 ringgit buying a packet of chicken rice. Today you may have to spend 8.50 simply because the currency has depreciated, and also cost of development, cost of raw materials have gone up. And so I think when the value of money has gone down, so the Big Mac index, so like for example, $1 buys you one burger 10 years ago. Today, one burger may cost you $2.50 or $1.80.
Right.
So whatever. So it's still one burger to you, but in terms of monetary value that you have to pay, it is more. And therefore, when we look at budget, yes, on paper, on face value, it looks like it is expansionary because it's bigger, it's fatter. But however, if you look at the amount of work that can be done with that amount of money, it may just be the same as last year or 5 years ago, simply because currency have depreciated, the value of money has gone down. Doctor, would you like to add on to that if I don't explain it very well?
Yeah, I think I would say the main concern obviously on the currencies, and that's the reason why it's important that the government need to show their commitment to ensure that the fiscal deficits will continue to remain under control. And I think the possible tabling of FRA, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, would actually add more credibility to that. Then therefore it sort of gives you the impression, especially to the foreign investors, especially the credit rating agencies. I think because these are very, very important for them in terms of to assess the government finances. So if there are a credible plan in place to ensure that every budgetary requirement is being met and it's not being, carelessly being dished out. So if that image can be projected to the sovereign analysts, I think eventually that would help to improve our currencies now going forward. That eventually helps our inflation to some degree.
Yes, that's an interesting point there from a doctor's side, as well as Yeen Sin, always a champion from the consumer or average Malaysian perspective, which is true. I mean, there's only so much that we how should we say? I mean, we know that food, for example, right, it's cost so much more than it ever used to. Particularly for urban centers. I've had the privilege of going around, the smaller towns in Malaysia and all that in the past few months and so on. Obviously, prices are lower in those small towns, but you can feel that overall rise, which is, of course, tied into overall inflation as well, not just food prices, isn't it? So, a doctor made a good comment as well on how do we best, in a way, work on improving investor sentiment overall. So hopefully that is one perspective with the acts possible coming into place, isn't it? Prof, what is your opinion in terms of the budget allocations per se, whether or not it's with the total allocated, the 372.3 billion, or even with the development side of things, right, which has also been beefed up also to 95 billion?
Yeah, I think the budget allocation is, I think, echo what Yeen has said earlier. So basically, it is not the amount of money that matters, but the thing what is the percentage-wise is it? It is not that very far different compared to the previous one. So this is kind of an expansion type of budget, I would rather say. It's just a continuity from what we has been budgeted last year. So the good part is that last year we have done something good with the budget, and then we can see a good output from that. So we are trying to, I think the government is trying to replicate the same thing altogether, but with this proper and then careful intervention with some buffer of expecting the 4% out of 6% then.
In terms of revenue, right, lady and gentlemen, anything to add on in terms of the taxation perspective? Something that we briefly touched on, but maybe now's the time and space for us to talk a little bit more about this perspective. The major changes, right? Individual income tax, for example, for those with earnings below 100,000, so that's being slashed by 2%, right, from 13 to 11. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then the lumping together of those who are having the income of exceeding 250,000 all the way to 400, bringing it to the same category as those prior in the 400 to 600,000 category at 25% taxation, right? What are your thoughts on this? Yeen Sin, I'm going to start with you.
Those earning contributors, EPF contributors earning between 50,000 annually to 100,000 now have got a 2% reduction in income tax. So from 13% to 11%, like you mentioned, and then those earning 70,000 to 100,000 will be reduced from 21% to 19%, also a 2% down. You also mentioned about the supposedly T20, those earning between 200,000 and up. Actually, 25% is actually a 0.5% up from the current rate. So I would say this is creative messaging that make people feel that, wow, we are taxing those making 200,000 and up.
Right.
We put them in the T20 category, but if we look at it by comparison to what these people have been paying, is really a 0.5% increase. But I think interestingly, maybe we need to wait for the figures from LHDN, I don't know, is that
I'm curious as well.
Taking 2% off from the M40
The M40, yes.
and increasing 0.5% on the supposedly T20.
Yes.
How do we balance the book?
What do we know? What
Whether
are the
it's a
figures
plus,
are like?
Whether
Yeah.
it's a plus or a minus,
Yeah.
we don't know.
Yeah,
So
I'm fairly sure it's a plus. How big a plus it is.
but it may not be a plus, actually. It may not.
Anybody has any inclination? Prof, Doctor, anything to add for this?
I just did
Okay,
some
doctor.
back of envelope calculation lah.
Perfect. Yes.
For those who earning like 50,000 to 100,000 taxable income per annum, I'm looking at in terms of monthly savings of around 83 ringgit per month to 167 ringgit per month. So typically, the MPC, the marginal propensity to consume.
Okay.
Those who are at the mid and low income side typically would have higher MPC compared to the T20 lah. And this, although we might see 83 ringgit to 167 ringgit savings, but I think because of high MPC during this category, that will actually spur the consumer spending for the economy lah.
Okay, that's good. That's a good sharing. That's also putting in perspective. Also, so there's likelihood for those in the M40 group with the tax savings to actually put it to spend it
Back to the economy.
That's right, back for the economy.
But I also like to take this from another angle. If we see this as an election budget, recovery budget, helping more industries and individuals to get back on their feet, then perhaps the government doesn't mind if this is just about breaking even in terms of tax collection, because I think the emphasis is really about supporting the rakyat's well-being at the same time undertaking economic reforms and consolidating fiscal plans for the country. So it really doesn't matter if the government has got an increase in revenue or decrease in revenue, because to me, I think it is quite marginal.
Yeah, because just taking average income of 100,000, right? So that's a savings of 2,000 ringgit,
Yes.
right? And as the doctor had mentioned, that it will spur the inclination to spend it and put it back to the economy. Yeah, Prof, anything to add on this perspective before we go for a short break?
Yeah, I think that is similar. The most important thing is to make the economic running, and then we want to empower our domestic things, and then we keep the cash flow in the healthy situations. With all of these, we call exemptions or basically discount, I would say. So basically, it can spur back into the economy, and then it can also impact us into a more healthy, we call supply and demand in the business.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Post-Budget 2023 tabling special continues in a few moments. Stay tuned.
Budget 2023 highlights.
To deal with mental health and domestic violence issues, the local social support center will be strengthened. A total of 8 million ringgit is provided for this center to act as an initial intervention location, as well as psychosocial advocacy and counseling sessions. The government will also continue to work with NGOs and shelters such as PS The Children to provide support to victims.
Budget 2023 highlights.
Good news for 1 million taxpayers among the middle-income M40 households. The individual resident income tax rate will be reduced by 2 percentage points for the taxable income range between more than 50,000 ringgit up to 100,000 ringgit. This means the taxable income range of more than 50,000 ringgit to 70,000 ringgit is reduced from 13% to 11%, while the taxable income range of more than 70,000 ringgit to 100,000 ringgit, the rate is lowered from 21% to 19%. At the same time, the taxable income range of more than 250,000 ringgit to 400,000 ringgit will be combined with the range of more than 400,000 ringgit to 600,000 ringgit and be subject to a 25% tax rate.
Yes, welcome back to a post-budget tabling for Budget 2023 right here on TRAXXfm. My name is Kong Yu. Thanks for tuning in, yeah? And also a big thanks to my three special guests, especially to Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Helmi Ali, Deputy Dean of Research, UKM-Graduate School, who joins us live but via the phone lines, Yeen, founder and CEO of Create, and Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam, Head of Economics and Research Department, EPF Malaysia. Yeah, I just heard a capsule there that was a voice by Otto. Essentially, for many of us, more discretionary income lah. Yeah, that's what it generally amounts to, isn't it? So yes, let's talk about in terms of other perspectives. For example, on the EPF side of things, right? So what are your your first impressions and your assessment thus far, Doctor?
Right. Just now I talked about the tendency for people to spend more based on the studies on the marginal propensity to consume. But at the same time, for this budget, we saw that the government has actually announced the limit for the EPF voluntary contribution has been raised from 60,000 to 100,000. And at the same time, the matching contribution for Saraan has also been raised from 250 to 350 ringgit, additionally of 100 ringgit lah. So from our numbers, we can see that the number of contributors for Saraan has actually bumped up quite a significant amount. For instance, in the first half of last year, the total contributors for this particular programs is about 17,000 thereabouts. For first half this year, it's already reaching 311,000 people, contributors. So that goes to show that people really want to save. So while we welcome the spending power, the consumer spending, but at the same time there is also a sense of to maintain their retirement savings. So I think that's fairly a good combination. Yeah,
as always, it's always a balance,
right?
Balancing act as well. Yeah, Professor, anything to add to this thought?
Yeah, I think I go with the same line with Dr. Abzal regarding this balancing between the more purchasing power that you have or the more money that you can spend. So it also ASB has been increased by 100,000. So means that they are trying to put some allocation and some way for people to reinvest into their own benefits at the end. So for the public or citizens that have a very good understanding on how they can capitalize the money that being given from them from the government and re-put back into the investment like ASB or SN, for example, if they can take this advantage well, towards the end they will benefit for themselves.
Yeah. Yeen, anything to add on this?
On EPF?
That's right. EPF, discretionary income and so on.
No, I think it's a good move for the government and EPF to allow people to, to chip in more into their savings, EPF savings, and the Saraan is certainly a very good initiative because you give people an alternative to save. Why I say alternative? Because the bank FD rate is nothing more lucrative than what EPF has been giving us over the years. Correct.
Yeah.
That's
Right?
That's a good point to keep in mind, right?
Really, I think that's really important because not everybody have got pension unless you are with the government,
Yes.
and not all government servants have got pension. There's so many contract staff and they are not protected. So if they do not contribute to the EPF, then they may have financial worries after they retire.
And then they can always put back into the EPF whatever they've taken out previous year.
Yeah.
So there are 10,000 that being brought up, and then basically this is the time for them to pour it back in the EPF.
Yeah, that's also a good point, a good reminder as well. It might be timely actually to do that, right? To fill your own personal coffer for the future back up again. Yeah. On other perspectives, any key highlights that our panelists today want to mention? I mean, from my perspective, and we briefly, because I wanted to keep this fresh as well with my in-studio guests, right? We were talking about how nothing really it's grabbing or is unexpected, which I guess is not necessarily a bad thing about this budget 2023 tabling per se. But let's hold that thought, right? And we'll come back in a few moments right here on TRAXXfm's post-budget 2023 tabling special right here on TRAXXfm.
Budget 2023 highlights.
Households with income of 1,169 ringgit will be able to enjoy electric subsidy up to 40 ringgit under budget 2023. The current eligible monthly income is 980 ringgit. This is expected to benefit more households.
This is TRAXXfm. Playing your favorite music 24/7. Experience the excitement right here. Right here on TRAXXfm.
Yeah, tune in to TRAXXfm's Post-Budget 2023 special. My name is Kong Yu, keeping company for this special. And of course, joined this hour by my guests in the studios, Yeen of Create, Dr. Afza of EPF Malaysia, as well as Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Helmi Ali, Deputy Dean of Research, UKM-Graduate School of Business. Yeah. So Budget 2023 has been tabled, right, with the theme Keluarga Malaysia Makmur Bersama. And overall, of course, giving a fatter, I like that word, budget allocation of 372.3 billion ringgit. As our guest Yeen had mentioned, looks expansionary, and overall, yes, in terms of the actual numbers themselves. Okay, but to keep it into perspective in terms of what the value actually means for all of us. Yeah, there is of course an increase in the development budget side of things as well to 95 billion ringgit in terms of allocation for those, including development for Sabah and Sarawak. I always look at those numbers and I always go like, oh, okay, I expected them to be a bit bigger. In terms of the allocation for infrastructure in particular. But any of these perspectives that any of our panelists would like to share more of? Professor, how about your thoughts? Professor, are you there? Okay, Doctor, any thing you'd like to share with us in terms of allocation of development?
Right. The allocation for development expenditure has been bumped up to 95 billion ringgit next year. So the way I see it is actually the government is trying to play catch up, because under draft nation plans, they have actually earmarked about 400 billion worth of development expenditure from 2021 up until 2025. If you divided that number with 5, then you would get about 80 billion ringgit per annum. But in the past 2 years, of course, our economy has been affected by COVID-19. That actually put a limit on how DE or development expenditure can be, spent on. So I think because of now, we are already in the endemicity phase. So that will allow the government to actually start to pump the economy through DE. And they mentioned about the key projects like ECRL, MRT3 and Pen Borneo Highway. So these are the critical infrastructure projects that could improve our long-term competitiveness lah. So I think that could be the catalyst for investment activities in our country because of the DE.
Yeah, so it's good, and finally we are in a way getting back on track on that. Also to reconcile so that we can move ahead with the overall development plans that we have, including the reference to 12 Malaysia plan, right? Yeen, any thoughts on this?
No, maybe one point to note is that yes, catch up game, like what Doctor have said, but we can also look at this from the perspective of rising or increased cost of building materials of approximately 30 to 40% over the last 3 years due to the global supply chain breakdown and also reduced production around the world. Yeah.
That's again putting into perspective. Well, it seems like it's quite a significant bump up, and it is on paper. Again, that perspective on playing catch up, that's one end. The actual cost
has really increased.
Has really increased on that. Yeah. Speaking of which, of course, the effort to again, put into balance. Because sustainability has always been something, I think that was given serious emphasis right before the pandemic hit. Right, for budget 2020, I believe there was already a significant sort of look or detailed allocation towards those. Even though if we talk about the actual amount itself, is not significant, but definitely in terms of the emphasis on giving allocations to certain sustainable projects related to sustainability, recycling and upcycling and things like that, there has been a big emphasis. So now it is again. Do you see that sort of emphasis going back now that we are in the endemic phase of COVID-19?
Well, towards the end of the budget, there is a bit of budget allocated for biodiversity, also for recycling, waste, something on waste as well. Let me just put all these under the net zero initiative, or the initiative towards to be more compliant of the ESG, environment, social and governance, the ESG. Okay, and I think that this direction is inevitable. Simply because, yes, to care for the environment is certainly very important to all of us. Otherwise, we don't have clean water in the future, fresh air. When our environment and ecosystem is being polluted, then we know what that means. So that's one. Number two is that when Malaysia is positioning ourselves, and also as a matter of fact that we are an exporting country, it is very important for all our manufacturers, producers who are exporting out of Malaysia to also comply with global governance, and ESG is one of the core. If I may also remind you that tariff or export taxes can come in many forms. Taxes and tariffs can come in the form of financial taxes and non-financial taxes. And I believe that the Malaysian manufacturers, Malaysian producers, and the country, we wouldn't want to be labeled as a country that needs to pay extra import tax when our product needs to be imported to a certain country because we emit too much greenhouse gases, we emit too much carbon, we are producing too much plastic waste into the ocean. And by the way, Malaysia is one of the top contributor of plastic waste in the marine, in the ocean.
By the way,
yeah, by the way. So having an emphasis, although in this 100 over pages worth of budget, we do not see a lot of ESG element, but I can really see that it is moving towards that direction. But yes, if the cake is only so big and the government needs to take care of so many sectors and all the segments, 5 fingers, not all are the same. Right.
So that's the thing. I mean, we know that this is how we create a sustainable future, right, for all of us. But at the same time as well, it is the disparity between economies of the world, by comparing ourselves as Malaysia and our status as a developing country still, right, and compared to what's happening out in developed countries and even those severely underdeveloped nations at the moment. There's such a big disparity, but overall the emphasis on sustainability is something that will will ensure that we are able to survive as global citizens.
It takes sustainable effort.
Yeah.
It takes sustainable effort. The effort has to be sustainable. It is a marathon. It is definitely not the sprint that we remember this year. We don't do it next year.
Yeah. Right. But again, it's a balancing act because that's what we need to do in terms of meeting certain requirements, like you were saying as well, Yeen, and having, again, to restore as much as possible investor confidence, right, back for our country. With the not so optimistic outlook that 2023 seems to be playing. I mean, on that note, right, maybe we can wrap up on that. Do you find that we is it just because it's not based on, say, real data at the moment that we have, isn't it? Are we feeling? Are we kind of just seeing through the lens of a little bit too much pessimism? Prof, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think being pessimist is always better than being too negative. So I think budget as a whole should encapsulate a very good movement and positive thinking altogether. If we are putting so much of negativity in doing a budget, then I think we couldn't go anywhere. I think I would like to add what the Yeen said about sustainability. It is very much important now. If we don't do now, then we need to, and then we're going to lose somewhere. So, for example, if we take into the palm oil industry in our country, which is our main commodity, is being impacted badly because of the sustainability issue. So, if we keep playing and then keep the sustainability out from the game, so then we're going to lose quite a lot in the future. And then again, we need to do a very higher catch-up game as well.
Right.
So I think being positive is always good in laying up a budget.
Okay. Final concluding thoughts, Doctor.
Well, I think it's a reasonable budget because it's a delicate balancing act. On one hand, we want to promote growth, but at the same time, we need to be cognizant about the potential threats or headwinds coming from abroad. So, of course, those who are the vulnerable groups will be the main focus, and at the same time we want to ensure that reformist agenda will continue to be there. So it's quite a reasonable budget to me.
Okay, concluding thoughts, Yeen Sin?
I think this budget, I see divisive policy interventions, such as redirecting and reprioritizing the budget resources towards additional resources, additional assistance and stimulus packages to different industries in need to help even out the uneven development and recovery due to COVID. But I also see the commitment to push for a more refined, targeted policies to drive economic recovery, to help the people build resilience, not only economically, but the people themselves, and to also put in catalyst for reforms.
Okay.
That's what I see.
Okay, well said, right? Concluding thoughts in 20 seconds, Prof?
Yeah, I think we need to be positive in this budget 2023. We need to give our full support on whatever budget has been led up. So we as a citizen of the country, then we should support and then do whatever we can do best for this budget to be successfully implemented in 2023.
Okay, well said. Thank you so much to my three special guests. You know who you are. Thank you for being with us live in the studios of TRAXXfm and over the phone lines right here with us on a post budget as well, 2023 special.
Experience the excitement right here on TRAXXfm.